Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
This is Dorothy.
Short version.
The short version. Well, welcome, and it's such a pleasure to be back with you. I love coming here. Whoever I'm speaking to about where I'm teaching, I always say such great things about being in your company because there's such a beautiful sense of presence and maturity spiritually and otherwise. So anyway, it's really nice to be back. When I was here in, I think it was February of last year, I did a little meditation on the ridgepole. I don't know if any of you remember, but one of you made it into my new book, and I just want to read. Was it you? I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, I won't go through the meditation is in here, but it was called Investigating a Ridgepole, and then after the meditation, I said, one man told me that he saw his ridgepole, that's what holds up our sense of a separate self. One man told me that he saw his ridgepole covered with sticky notes about all the ways he had been told he was supposed to be by parents, grandparents, teachers, and others. And when it was taken down, there was a sense of tremendous freedom. Was that you, Howard?
No,
you don't remember.
I remember being there and hearing that.
Well, you don't have to fess up whoever it was if you're here today. It was totally anonymous. But anyway, I just wanted you to know that one of you made it into this book. So I wanted to just invite you, before I say too much, to look at anything in this room the way that you usually do, whether it's each other or the floor, the cushion, whatever. Just the way that you usually look at something. Okay. And did you notice that you had a thought about it or a judgment about it? It's pretty, it's shutting, it's whatever it is. Do you know? There was some narration, right? We have this commentator that seems to love to be here. It seems to be here commenting on the passing scene pretty much every waking moment. But now I'm going to invite you just to look at maybe the same thing, and if you can, just look without any commentator. Just look without a narration about it. We're just looking clearly from what's awake in us. It has no judgment. It's not adding beautiful, ugly, good, bad. It's not adding anything. There's just this pure seeing of what is. That's an enlightened moment, guys. But I wanted to talk a little bit about this narrator, because this is what keeps the sort of center of a separate me going, because we locate ourselves, don't we, in this idea of whoever that is that's talking in our mind, whatever that narrator is saying, whatever it's feeling, whatever it's judging, whatever its projects are. I'm not saying this to make it wrong, but just to point out, really, that the thing that we take ourselves to be is actually illusory. It has no independence from our Buddha nature or from the consciousness that is aware, the presence that's aware of what's speaking, what's thinking, what's feeling, what's talking, what's listening, and so forth. So we're so used to identifying with the narrator that's where our consciousness is so often located. It almost feels like, well, that's our home ground. But is it really? Is your home ground really up here? I doubt many of you say, I feel so strongly about this. No, it's just like, I feel passionately about this, or about you, or whatever. We don't point to our head, we touch our chest. And there's a felt sense of this heart that we share. It's what we share with everything and everyone. And that's our Buddha nature. That's this, what I'm calling these days the heart of awareness. And the reason I use the heart of awareness instead of just non-dual awareness is because when it's moving in the body-mind, it's compassionate. It's loving. There's joy. There's gratitude. There's not any judgment about what's arising. And so when we're not judging what's arising, we actually have an opportunity to look deeply into whatever it is that appears to separate us from the moment, or appears to separate us from one another, or it appears to separate us from nature, or the divine, or Buddha, whatever word works. So it's almost as though, if we were adults trying to learn to walk as little babies, we'd never walk, because there's just this judgment. I failed. I fell down again. What's wrong with me? Why can't I learn this? Da da da. But you see, life is just moving. It's moving each of us. It's moving itself. And just as when that baby learns to stand up, you toddler, try to walk, fall down. Nature just says, stand up again. It's not here judging. It's not here saying that was good, that was bad. Of course, parents do, and teachers, and partners, and there's a lot of judgment about what should and shouldn't happen. And that's just what it is. It doesn't mean it's right or wrong. It's just conditioned judgment, and we all have that. We have conditioned mind. But we're so used to identifying ourselves with that conditioned mind, whatever it is, that we're in a prison often. A prison of our own thoughts, a prison of our own judgments, a prison of our own conditioned ideas about how we ought to be, or how life should be, or how someone else should be. And there's a lot of suffering, in case you haven't noticed. There's a lot of suffering in there. In that way of somehow believing all of these thoughts are reality, when in fact it's just a virtual reality that we have going on in conditioned mind. But what gives conditioned mind its sense of being? There's something deeper than our thoughts. What's present to the thoughts? What is perceiving thoughts? That is never, ever apart from us. This that's perceiving, this that's aware, this that's present to whatever is going on. And so rather than identifying ourselves only with this idea of a separate person, when we become more and more aware, or our attention's going more and more to our presence, we see the person from a very different perspective. So I talk about, presence and personhood. There's sort of the play of consciousness, right? There's presence, and then there's this identification with personhood, but actually they're not two. But we can come from different perspectives. These are just dimensions of our being. Presence is this open, awake, and compassionate heart that we share, awareness that we share, Buddha nature that we share. And then all of our ideas about the person arise from that, in that, as that actually. Not two, but just different dimensions, Here's thought, personhood, ideas of da-da-da, and here's presence, always here. It's here if you're judging these flowers, it's here if you're not judging these flowers. But when you're not judging these flowers, you're actually seeing reality. You're seeing the truth of something, the isness of something. That's true when we look at one another as well. To actually see the truth in one another is an incredible gift. to actually see that this that's looking isn't separating itself. A thought does that. But the looking itself, it doesn't cut itself apart. It doesn't cut itself apart from the flowers or the Buddha or one another. And so, this is why we sit. This is why we have spiritual practice, to continually put our attention to what's deeper than thoughts and judgments and feelings. I'm sure you've all noticed, or if you haven't, I'll point it out to you now, that what we give attention to, we give reality to. Right? In that moment. We give reality to what we pay attention to. So, without judging what you should or shouldn't pay attention to, if you just notice that attention moves, but your presence doesn't actually. What's deepest and truest isn't coming and going. Now, if you've had some degree, as many of you have, of waking up to your true nature, then you probably have had the experience, as many of us have. I got it, I lost it. Some of you know that one. I had it, I was there, it was just beautiful, da-da-da-da. Now, here I am in my mind again. But I would just invite you, and maybe we'll just do a little exercise, invite you to see if it's true that you have to leave home in order to have a thought. So I might just invite you to close your eyes for a moment and just let yourself have an experience of thinking. You can think about anything, but just become more and more subtly sensitive to what the felt sense is of having a thought. What's the energy when you're thinking? Where are you locating yourself when you're thinking? So some of you may not have a sense of the energetics of it, but many of you may. And you may feel like your shoulders raise a little bit, or your attention goes up to your head. Like I say, we're not making it wrong, but just get a felt sense of the energy of thinking. Okay, now I would just invite you to go into your home ground, wherever that is for you. Just let yourself have an experience of being in your home ground, or this deep heart, or however it is that you connect with what's deepest and truest in yourself. And just feel the energy of that. Feel what might have shifted when you just let your attention come back home to your home ground or your true self. And really get a feel for it. There is a felt sense in the body when we have come home, even temporarily, for a moment. And when you feel that you have experience of this deeper dimension of yourself, I want to invite you to stay home and yet let yourself have a thought. So we're staying home in this open presence, this heart of awareness, this home ground, felt sense, however it comes to you. And yet, now you let yourself have a thought while remaining at home. And I just invite you to play with it for a few minutes. Just resting in your home ground, and then moving up to thought, and then coming back to the home ground and having a thought without moving from home, without leaving home, so to speak. We can never really leave home, but we can have an experience of doing so because our attention is moving. Say we're not making it wrong, we're just investigating if it's possible to become more and more aware of the presence that's already here. The awake awareness that's already here before you try to become awake and aware. And what does it like? What does it feel like? What's the sense of feeling that ground or that depth, even while life is happening, while thoughts are happening, or conversations happening, or listening is happening. But you're home. You're at your home ground. So we just move our attention back and forth a bit and just play with it. So we can do this anytime, but did any of you have a sense of what it was like to feel located in your home ground and yet thoughts are moving? Nobody? The failure of a meditation time. Yes?
I felt that by being sort of dropping back, not that there's a place, but
Yeah.
a felt sense of being awake, or as I experienced it, and simultaneously opened my heart.
Yes.
Yeah, as if I were breathing through my heart.
Yes. Yeah, beautiful. Any other experience anyone could share? Yeah.
This might be kind of dramatic, but when the first exercise, I kind of felt like when I just let my thought take over,
Yeah.
I felt like my body was kind of a volcano. Like the explosion was in my head, and then I felt my body like tense up, like ground beneath the volcano would have to do. And then when I envisioned, like I kind of thought of my body as like a meadow with like rain coming down to kind of soothe everything. And then there was still a little bit of the explosion, but it was much more tempered. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that description of being like a volcano, and I mean, certain thoughts will especially create that, right? But yeah, there's a tension that you feel. You know, sometimes it just feels like, you know, there's tension in your arms and your body when you're just concentrated all of your, you know, tension up here. Any other? Yeah, have.
Especially when I close my eyes, and I have this intention of returning to home. There's like a flooding of light.
Yeah.
You know, there's more light that just seems to come into my consciousness.
Yes.
But I'm also struck by how, you know, you recognize that you're thinking, so you consciously let go, and then suddenly you realize, oh, I'm thinking again. You know?
Sure.
It is like a volcano. It's just an endless spew.
And if we know that it's just an endless spew, and we don't take it to be something we always have to believe, then we're freer, because it just becomes transparent. I mean, the object is not to have a war with thinking. I mean, you're going to lose that war. You haven't noticed. But this is just an invitation to see how it might be to kind of weight yourself, you know, in a different place instead of having all the weight up here, you know, in terms of our identity. When you said light, it reminded me of a conversation I had recently with my 8-year-old grandson. He's a real science guy. He has the periodic table on his wall. He's dead at 8 years old. But everything is like science. He's you know. So anyway, we were talking about, well, he was talking about black holes and the Big Bang and the this and the that, you know, and all this stuff. And I said, well, let me ask you this question, you know, because he thinks science will answer everything eventually. I'll tell you another conversation in a second about that. But this one, you know, so I said, well, but do you know what came before the Big Bang? You know, science doesn't know that yet, right? Nobody's really figured out what came before the Big Bang. And he said, "Oh yes, Grandma, I know." He said, "I read it in a children's book." And I know what came before. And I said, "Oh, pray tell." "Tell me, what came before the Big Bang?" And he said, "Light." Light. I didn't go into the light of awareness and non-dual awareness with him at that moment, but I thought there's hope here, But he was listening. I was in my study and I was listening to something that somebody wanted to put on online of my talking, blah, blah. Anyway, I was saying something about a mystery, and he walked in and he said, "Grandma, there are things we don't know now, but really science will figure it all out someday. That science will have an answer to all the mysteries if we just, wait long enough, da, da, da." And I said, well, let me ask you this question. Do you think science will ever be able to produce or define love? And yet we feel it, don't we? We know it when it's here. What do you think about that? And he thought for the longest time. And finally he said, "No, I don't think science is going to be able to do that. We can measure brain waves, we can do EKG, we can do a lot of things, but love itself, And so when you were speaking about, like this light, it's like connects us with the heart, doesn't it?
This is a very precocious conversation with him.
Well, I agree. He is a special kid, but then he's my grandson, so I get to have those biases. But nonetheless, yeah, it's very fun. Anybody else in terms of the thinking and
what came to mind was in that heart of awareness place, there's nothing to defend.
Exactly.
It's an undefended place, so anything that comes your way is just what it is.
Yes.
As opposed to having the reference of and I'm being attacked.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And we all love openness when it's this vastness out here, right? But when this openness starts moving in the body-mind, it can feel really vulnerable because we're used to defending a separate self that we think is who we are because of our thoughts about who we are, not because of what we truly are. So yeah, that vulnerability, I think, is part of living more and more from the open heart. And what does that feel like? And sometimes, if we've had a lot of pain, we'll come into the heart and realize it's really defended. It's got a lot of walls because we feel like something threatened it way back when. A lot of people live with that. But then I think we can ask ourselves the question, does love need to be defended? What is it that we're defending? Can love actually be threatened? Can it? A body can be threatened. Feelings can be threatened. The sense of a separate self can be threatened. But this, it's not at war with any of those things. And that's why it can be open to all of it, and so we can bring those places that are, holding or scared or raging or whatever. We can just bring those places into the heart, and see what it's like to just let them be touched there. We think we have to have a big project, at least 25 years of therapy before, or maybe 10 if you're lucky or whatever. But really, there's an incredible transformative power to just letting whatever this is be touched. Here's another little thing for you to do. Okay, just make a fist, one hand. Make a fist with one hand. Yeah. Okay? Just feel the tension of it, like that volcano is ready to go, and then just let it rest in your open palm. Just let it rest there and see what happens when we're not really trying to do anything with it. We're not trying to pry open the hand. Just see what effect just openness has on what's contracted and closed. Do any of you feel a little softening happening?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And it keeps happening. When we bring consciously these things into the open heart, the openness of our true Buddha nature, when we let them just be touched. Our egoic mind says, no, we've got to figure out how to pry these babies open, and I'm not doing it right, and why is this still happening? And this is like so simple. And it allows us to actually understand this more, because we're not at war with it. So, we get to know, in this process called awakening, we get to know how our mind operates. What are the structures in our own minds that are constantly grabbing attention, or trying to attach there or push away here, or whatever, and we're not judging it. We're just really observing from the openness of our true nature. What is it, And it's different than trying to come up with reasons. I mean, the reasons will appear if they need to appear. But just that simple and gentle touch of your awake, aware, compassionate heart on whatever's here is incredibly transformative. and so much simpler than many of us imagine. One thing I see as a so-called spiritual teacher, people will come to see me for spiritual counseling, so to speak. Dokusan, call it in our tradition. And because there are still, people say, I'm still feeling this, or I'm still having this contraction, or I'm still having this thought. The still piece, it's judged. It's judged to make many people believe that they're not this awake, aware beingness that we all are. Because we've decided this doesn't belong. This couldn't be part of it. So I would just ask you, when you're investigating your own experience, does this openness have anything that it's judging? Is it at war with our humanity? Many minds believe it is, but experientially, it's like, is the open space of this room refusing anything that's in it? It doesn't mean that as human beings we may not need boundaries. If somebody's coming at me to hit me, I probably will move out of the way. It's about letting life move us in its own expressions. You see, we think our expressions are separate, but are they really? Or do they come right out of this ground that we share? Like you had a field, this is the ground, and we're all like wildflowers of different dimensions, different characteristics, different feelings, different ethnicities, different genders, and so forth and so on. But we're all coming from the same ground. And so when you realize that dimension of yourself, it's not out there. It's this dimension of ourself that is this true ground. It's kind of a groundless ground when we come in touch with it, but there's a sense of being grounded in that, and you can feel it. If I said, well, take a seat in yourself, just in this moment, what does it feel like to take an actual seat in yourself? Not in an idea of you, but the truth of you. Now, nobody's posture changed, but often your posture changes when you do that. There's something that connects itself, Heaven and earth get connected right through you, through your expression of this body-mind. And I guess the last thing I want to mention in this part of our dialogue together, because I want to see what's important to you guys, is what I do talk about in this newer book, Spiritual Ambition. Because our limited egoic consciousness is constantly thinking that this idea of a separate me, that it is what's going to be able to become unconditionally loving, always present, never judging, and so forth and so on. And what do we find out? It's a failure, isn't it? To try to co-opt what isn't this egoic thought. The egoic thought is not going to become that. It's already our true nature. And we keep looking in the wrong place. And then when we have an opening, I must have done something right, or that meditation, I have to do it again, or I have to go back to the tree where I had this opening, or whatever it is. But actually, it just happened. It just happened. Like your thoughts just happen. Like your body just happens. Like whatever's going on in it just happens. Which doesn't mean that what also happens is not that we influence one another. We're co-creating reality all the time as we sit with each other, talk with each other, relate to one another, and so forth. But this ambition, it's like it thinks that it did it, or it's going to awaken. It's not a person that wakes up. It's not a person. This that's awake in us, it just reveals itself to itself. And that's very different from what most people imagine. They imagine that there's a self who's going to become awake, who's going to become enlightened, or whatever it is. But actually, what's revealed when we're quiet enough to really enter, and have this narrator be melted, we might say, into the silence. What actually gets revealed is this is just being itself. It's revealing itself to itself. Awakeness is awakening to itself. And then the mind comes in and says, I am awake. I've done something. Or it's happened to a me, and it's innocent, but it's not accurate. And so a lot of times we experience that getting taken away. The whole I got it, I lost it thing. Because we're identifying a certain experience with our true nature instead of identifying what's awake as our true nature. And therefore some experiences are okay to have and some are not okay to have from the mind's perspective. And then we think, well, that's what true nature is saying, but is it? I'd invite you to find out for yourself. And so there's so much suffering with that judgment. There's so much suffering with that judgment. That this couldn't possibly be here. I see people, for instance, who had trauma as children, but they've had incredible awakenings to true nature and are living most of the time, with that understanding and then something triggers that trauma response, and they think, I couldn't possibly have had this experience. I couldn't possibly be what we all are, or this wouldn't be happening. Once again, conflating experience with what's actually free. And this is free simply because it's not dependent on conditions. It's free even from an idea of freedom. Now, the mind doesn't much like that idea. Well, I think I'll be free when all these things are taken care of. But it's life, right? Yeah. Those of you who've been around, it's just life is life. Does it mean that there'll never be challenges? No. Does it mean there'll never be moments of identification? Probably not. Does it mean that, if I have a pain or an illness or whatever, that means I'm not awake? No, it does not. It does not. And this idea that, it should look this way, no, it should look that way, no, it should look this way. It just keeps the mind in this continual carrot and stick mentality, following the carrot, having the stick. And so we're not actually investigating, what's here, what wants to be revealed. How does awareness want to come inside these things that separate us, these contractions that we might feel? How does it want to move to actually liberate from the inside instead of trying do it from outside. I think I've blah-blahed long enough. I'd rather talk to you and see what's important to you, and what questions or comments maybe are around. Yes.
From my years of the Bruein experience, I've heard a lot of what your message before about the value of non-judgment. But where does values come in? I mean, where it is important to say this is unskillful behavior and needs to be looked at versus this is skillful behavior.
We can all relate in our political situation
To
what your question
I'm trying to say,
is
do not
pointing to.
mention Trump.
I did. You are the one who mentioned Trump just now. I was skillfully trying to avoid him. No, but you see, this is where when you realize that life is living itself, it's living itself in these different dimensions, in these different things. And what is ignorant of our true nature is constantly dividing us. And what is not ignorant of our true nature is not dividing us. But at the same time, it moves in truth. It moves in compassion. And so I think the most important part of looking at those places where we feel, yes, our values are really important to uphold, because that's how we've been conditioned. And that's also from seeing at a deeper perspective what's true. What's true and what's not.
Because I don't think values are just how we've been conditioned. I think there are relative values and ultimate values. And so some of those values just come from
true. And
the heart.
I mean, the value piece is a mind-driven thing, but the actual experience of the heart opening, if you're calling that an ultimate value, then I would agree, with love and compassion being the way our true nature begins to move when it's awakened to itself. So when that's the case, how do we bring that into our relationships with those who are different from us? How do we actually feel moved to stand up for what feels true? We all get to do that. We get to do that. But, is true nature there saying this shouldn't happen? I'm not sure. I mean, from my perspective, it doesn't have a judgment.
I find it very difficult to reconcile with my feeling that there are things going on that are hurtful and
I don't disagree.
Yeah.
No, I mean that's where suffering comes in,
Yeah.
and really looking into ourselves as to the cause of suffering in ourselves. If those people who we feel are causing great suffering in the world or in our own lives, if they were actually at peace and loving themselves, they would be loving the rest of us as well. So when we offer those meditations, may you be at peace, may you be, may you come home to your true nature, may you come home to the love in your own heart. When we offer that to our so-called enemies, we're actually giving something or inviting something that has the power to change those deep-seated, ignorant ideas that we're not one. So I don't, we all get to stand up for what feels important. I always like to go back to something I heard about Thich Nhat Hanh leading a peace march in L.A. back in the Vietnam era, and there were 300 marchers, and there were all kinds of war people on the sidelines with their signs and ready to fight the peaceniks and blah blah blah, and Thich Nhat Hanh basically said, we need to march from peace, not simply for peace. And so they did. They marched from that heart of peace, and they were very quiet, those 300 people. And so there was nothing to fight against. And pretty soon, the hecklers and the war people, whatever you want to call it, there was nothing to fight. And they shut up. So to me, that's, when we're coming from that place, then we get to be, however, if you feel like getting involved politically or getting involved in a peace movement or getting involved, great, that's how life is moving. That's That's the truth that as it's coming through your expression of this mystery. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, it's troublesome, isn't it?
It's very complex.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And yet, there's also, at least here, some faith in the wholeness of being, moving what needed to be seen into consciousness. The whole collective shadow, whether it's gender, sexuality, race, whatever it is, the collective shadow is really coming into consciousness, isn't it? It's been here. It's always been here. But now something is, and now what will happen? See, these are opportunities, aren't they, for us to look inside ourselves, rather than just say, it's you guys, whoever the so-called other is. And what will happen, I don't know, but having lived through myself, Watergate, the assassination of both Kennedys and Martin Luther King, living in Chicago when there were tanks in the street, having lived through that in my own experience and seeing that we could get through it, I have some faith that we can get through this one as well. That ultimately truth will prevail. But I have to have a caveat here that, the Western mind, especially the Western mind, thinks that, to come into wholeness just means one side of wholeness, the good, the beautiful, and the true. But it doesn't. The whole is the whole. That's the whole. It's the dark and the light. It's the yin and the yang. Duality is not a mistake, because this is how the infinite is relating to itself. This is how it's having its dream. This is how it's seeing itself and relating and loving itself or not, but it's whole. And we wouldn't know dark without light. We wouldn't know good without evil. We wouldn't know health without illness. We wouldn't know up without down. So the dualities are always defining each other. And as long as we're living in these forms, our mind is operating in duality. Small mind, I'm not talking about big mind. It's always operating in time. And what we're pointing to here in each of us and ourselves is this timeless dimension of who we are, of what we are, of the truth of what we are. And so the more we're in touch with that and wanting to come from that place, there's transformations, both in our own experience and our personal relationships and in the relationship to the greater whole. So thanks for bringing that up. I mean, it's on all of our minds. It truly is. What else is here for anyone today? Comment, question? Yes.
Yes.
It's Jim, right?
Yes. When you just went like this, did you pray?
Yes, I do. And people will say in the non-dual community, well, there's no one to pray to. Who would they pray? Who would you pray to? But what I mean when I say that is I'm looking to that deeper dimension of what we all are. I don't call it by a name. I mean, I could. I can call it God. I can call it true nature. I can call it, love. I can call it lots of things. But a lot of times, and people will come to me and they'll be confused because maybe they had a devotional personality. Devotion was really important, and then they came into the whole non-dual experience or recognition or whatever, and they said, "But I want to pray, but who would I pray to? I can't pray." And to me, if there's a deep movement, it's the infinite relating to itself. And so sometimes we miss our opportunity of surrendering to that greater knowing when we think we can't do something that seems like prayer. That's my take.
I have a prayer list which I'm convinced is efficacious.
I'm sure. I'm
very religious about
yes.
going through it. And I might add people if we take them off.
You take requests?
And it feels completely consonant with what you've been talking about today.
I'm glad. There was a study done, I think it was in the 80s, 90s, but at General Hospital and cardiac unit. And they divided up patients, blind study, and half of them, their names were sent to different prayer groups, Buddhist groups, meditation groups, Christian prayer groups, Jewish prayer groups, and the other half weren't. And the half that were prayed for, one author said, if that were a medication, drug companies would be at it like that because it was so different. It was statistically significant that group had fewer complications, got out of the hospital sooner, and blah, blah, blah.
I knew it.
That was you praying for those guys, right? I mean, that doesn't mean that if, quote, prayer isn't answered, that we've done something wrong. Because, who would want some of the things that have been the greatest teachers in our lives? 3 members of my family have had cancer, including my husband who died of it, and myself. I wouldn't want that experience on anybody. I wouldn't wish it on anybody. But I cannot tell you how valuable a lesson each of those things was in different ways, And so, to me, it feels like life is actually, if we're serious, if we really want the truth, life will support it. And it doesn't mean life as in I'm going to be immortal in a body, but life will support our opening, our deepening through our own experience, whatever they are. As they say, no mud, no lotus. So we all get our version, of what the mud is. But right out of that, something can begin to bloom.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Thank you all. Thank you for your presence here. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Announcements?
Hi, I'm your host today. There's hot water for tea. When you're finished with your teacups, you can put them in the dishwasher. And there's refreshments. At 12:30, people gather at the door to go to lunch. So if you'd like to go to lunch with a group, eat there. There is a sign-up sheet on the credenza if you want to be in the directory, put your name, etc., etc. And then I'll be going around with a Donna Bowl. Suggested donation is $10, but give what you can or be generous. And I want to talk about the newsletter today, because I don't know if everybody, a lot of people have been coming for a long time, but newsletter and the website. So the newsletter is available on the website. We don't print a lot of extra ones, but if you're interested in looking at the newsletter, and on the website we have all the talks probably from 20, 25 years. So it's always a great place to go if you're bored with TV and 10 talks. There's a thing, a blurb about the retreat that's going to happen the last weekend of September, and our teacher's going to be Bill Weber. What else is on there? It has all the speakers and their bios and stuff. So
it mentions that if you donate to Community Thrift Store, you can earmark your donations for GBF.
Number 41.
40.
I think it's 41, isn't it?
No, it's 40.
Better figure that one out.
Yeah. You're getting to some other cause.
I'm just going to pray.
All my wing donations went to somebody.
I had 2 tickets for Heisenberg at ACT on Tuesday night. Orchestra seats I got real cheap, so if anybody wants them, I can't get them. So this evening, they're yours.
Yeah, I just want to remind everybody, we're having a day-long retreat here, April 14th. The theme is Passion and Compassion, and Dale Borglund is our teacher. And it's no charge. We ask for a dollar for the teacher, and there is some flyers over here on the credenza. You need to sign up for it, and it's filling up, so if you're interested, you should probably be proactive about doing that.
Without saying the T word, I know that a lot of people have expressed interest in taking part
in the political process, especially looking around the country at things, but there is an election in California that is crucially important. In June, it's Devin Nunes, who's in Tulare County. He's being opposed by a very formidable Democratic opponent named Andrew Jans. And I'm wondering if about 15 people would like to get together for about 2 hours and write postcards to the voters in that district. And I was thinking we could do it after, on a Sunday, perhaps the 8th, or the 15th, 16th, right after GBF. We can go somewhere, go to my house or something, have something to eat, and spend about 2 hours handwriting postcards, probably with 15 or 20 each. Is that something people here would be interested in doing? Yeah, can I just have a show of hands?
And please do it because I have a relative that's a neighbor of Nunez and very... Anyway, they need the postcard is all.
And I asked what does the Sunday, is it the 8th? April. Either the 15th of April or the Sunday before that.
Easter's the first.
Right. So it would be the 8th or the 15th.
Well, the 15th is a retreat. Oh,
No, that's Saturday.
14th.
That's before Saturday the 14th. So it would be the day after the retreat or the Sunday before that, the 8th or the
Sunday the
15th.
I want to talk to you in person because I have logistical issues that might interfere with that. I want to see if I can get around.
Okay, I think I'll get a piece of paper and if you could sign up afterwards, so I'll have an idea of what we're dealing with, and we'll choose one of those two Sundays.
Any other now? Yes.
Yes. I know this is a bit in advance. But the last weekend of April, the San Francisco Choral Society, in conjunction with a fabulous new men's group, a cappella group that does barbershop quartet called the Fog City Singers, are performing Rachmaninoff's Vespers at St. Ignatius. And all of the music is about internal movement of the heart. It is just totally transporting. A cappella and it's indescribably
Transcendent.
And Slavonic, yeah, oh my God. But if you can remember that, I'll make an announcement later, but I won't be here most Sundays in April, so I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
As most of you know, we do a dinner for a homeless shelter, Walker Street Youth Center, on the third Saturday every month. We try to give them a meal that's a little fancier than what they normally get. And we did one yesterday, and it was very well received. Periodically, I have to bring in new volunteers, through attrition and so on. So if it's like one of those times right now. So if you're interested in participating, it's only like about 4-hour commitment, third Saturday every month, and it's not like you have to do it every month. Please contact me, and I'll put your name on the list with the other volunteers, and I'll be sending out emails from the time point to put together a team.
Can I say one more thing? As an announcement, if any of you feel moved to attend an 8-night retreat instead of a 1-day retreat, I have one coming up April 28th to May the 6th, and you are all invited. So just want to put that out.
What's your new book called?
Ending the Search from Spiritual Ambition to the Heart of Awareness.
And it's out there?
It's out there, and Adyashanti wrote a foreword that's a little teaching in itself. Yeah.
And it's
a week. You said a week?
It's eight
Retreat, yeah, it's 8 nights. 8 nights at Vajrapani Institute.
That's what I was going to ask, because that's where we have our...
Oh, you have yours. Well, then you know what a special place that is, right? So if you want to hang for 8 nights in the...
Is it 8 nights in a row?
Yeah.
Oh, so the days involved in
Thank you again, everyone.
Thank you. Just next week is Baruch Golden, who's a longtime GBF member who has been practicing Vipassana meditation since 1998. He completed Spirit Rock's Community Dharma Leaders Program in 2012 and the Buddhist Chaplaincy Training Program at the Sati Center in Redwood City in 2013. He teaches Dharma to many sitting groups in the Bay Area. Baruch is a registered nurse and has been doing hospice work for the past 14 years. He will be teaching next week. And so, with that, any other announcements? Let's grab it for Sorry.
By the power and truth of this practice, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. May all never be separated from the sacred happiness which is without sorrow, and may all live in equanimity without too much attachment or too much aversion, believing in the equality of all that lives.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.